The knock came at sunset, 3 sharp raps against weathered wood that made Clayton York drop his coffee mug and reach for the rifle by the door before he could think better of it. Nobody came to his ranch anymore, not since the drought had driven most of his neighbors away, and left him alone with 300 acres of Oklahoma Territory dust and memories that cut deeper than any Apache arrow. He pulled open the door with the rifle half raised, then froze when he saw her standing there in the fading amber light, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other clutching a torn shawl around her shoulders. She was Apache, no question about that, with high cheekbones and black hair that hung past her waist despite being matted with trail dust. Her dress was little more than rags, a strange mixture of native and white clothing that spoke of displacement and hard travel. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, dark and direct, meeting his gaze without fear despite the rifle pointed in her general direction. She could not have been more than 20, maybe 22 at most, and heavily pregnant, 7 or 8 months if he had to guess. "I work," she said in halting English, her voice rough like she had not spoken in days. "I need work. I cook, clean, so you have work." Clayton slowly lowered the rifle, suddenly aware of how he must look, a scarecrow of a man at 26 with unkempt brown hair and 3 days of beard stubble, pointing a weapon at a pregnant woman asking for honest labor. The shame of it burned through him like whiskey on an empty stomach. He glanced past her into the gathering darkness, looking for whoever had brought her here, but saw only empty prairie and the dying light. "You alone?" he asked, which was a stupid question because obviously she was alone, but his brain was struggling to catch up with the situation. "Yes." "Husband dead. Town people say go away." She swayed slightly, and Clayton dropped the rifle entirely, reaching out to steady her before she could topple off his porch. Her skin was burning hot through the thin fabric of her dress, and he could feel her trembling. "When did you last eat?" he demanded, and she just looked at him with those unflinching eyes that suddenly seemed very far away. "Never mind, stupid question. Come inside." He half carried her into the house, guiding her to the chair near the cold fireplace. She sank into it gratefully, and he noticed her feet were wrapped in strips of cloth that had once been some kind of garment, soaked through with blood from walking God knew how many miles. His chest tightened with an anger that had nowhere to go. He had seen plenty of cruelty in his time on the frontier, but something about a pregnant woman being turned away from every door in Guthrie made his blood boil. "Stay put," he ordered, then winced at his tone. "Please, just rest. I will get you some food and water." She nodded slightly, her eyes already half closed. Clayton moved quickly through his kitchen, such as it was, a bachelor establishment with more dust than dishes. He had some salted pork that he fried up quickly, adding the last of his potatoes and an onion that was starting to sprout. While that cooked, he pumped water into a tin cup and brought it to her, watching as she drank it down so fast she choked, water running down her chin. He refilled it 3 more times before she slowed down. The food did not take long, and he piled it onto his one decent plate, bringing it to her with a fork that he hoped was reasonably clean. She ate like someone who had not seen a meal in a week, which she probably had not, picking up the food with her fingers when the fork proved too slow. He let her eat in peace, busying himself with building up the fire even though the September evening was not particularly cold. He just needed something to do with his hands, while he tried to figure out what to do with a pregnant Apache woman who had appeared on his doorstep, like some kind of test from the Almighty. When she finished eating, she set the plate carefully on the floor beside the chair and looked at him again with those steady dark eyes. "Thank you," she said, and the simple dignity in her voice made his throat tight. "I work now. You tell me what to do." You are not working tonight, Clayton said firmly. You are going to rest. When did you last sleep? She frowned, as if trying to remember. 2 days. 3, I walk from reservation. They say I not Apache enough because of husband. He was white man, worked for cavalry as scout. Other soldiers kill him by mistake in the dark. They say sorry, give me nothing. Apache people say I not belong because I marry white man. White people in Guthrie say I not belong because I am Apache, so I come here to place with no people. The matter-of-fact way she recounted this tragedy made it somehow worse. Clayton ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. He had 1 bedroom with 1 bed, and he was not about to make a pregnant woman sleep on the floor. You take my bed tonight. I will sleep out here by the fire. No, I sleep on floor. You are kind to feed me. I will not take bed. Yes, you will, he said, and when she started to protest, he held up his hand. Look, miss, what is your name? Winona, she said. Winona Durant. Durant was husband name. My Apache name was different, but I am Winona now. Miss Durant, I am Clayton York, and this is my ranch such as it is. You are sick with fever and exhausted and carrying a child. You will sleep in the bed, and that is final. I have slept on harder surfaces than a floor, I promise you. Something flickered in her eyes, almost like amusement. You are very bossy, Cowboy. Yes, well, somebody has to be sensible around here. He stood up and offered her his hand. Come on, let me show you where you can rest. She took his hand and let him help her up, though he could tell it cost her pride to accept even that much help. He led her to his bedroom, which was barely more than a closet with a bed and a trunk, but the sheets were reasonably clean because he had just changed them 2 days ago. She looked at the bed like it was a palace. I will bring you some water to wash with, he said, then hesitated. Those feet need tending. Do you know anything about wound care? I know, she said quietly. I will care for them. He brought her water in a basin, along with some clean cloths that had once been a shirt before moths got to it, and a tin of salve that he used on the horses when they got scrapes. She accepted these with a nod of thanks, and he retreated, closing the door behind him to give her privacy. Clayton stood in his main room, listening to the faint sounds of her moving around in his bedroom, and wondered what in the hell he had just done. Guthrie was not a particularly tolerant town even on its best days, and the idea of a white man housing an Apache woman, pregnant with a white man's child no less, was going to cause talk. Probably worse than talk. But what was he supposed to do? Turn her away to die on the prairie? He had not fought in the Indian Wars, had come to Oklahoma Territory after most of the fighting was done, but he knew the history. Knew about the forced relocations, the massacres on both sides, the broken treaties and the hunger and the diseases that had decimated the tribes. Knew that people like Winona Durant fell through every crack in an already broken system. He made himself a bedroll by the fireplace, using his saddle as a pillow the way he had during his cowboy days before he saved enough to buy this land. The floor was hard, but he had told her the truth about sleeping on worse. He lay there staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the house settle around him, and tried not to think about how much his life had just become complicated. The next morning, he woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, which was strange because he had been a bachelor for 2 years and was not in the habit of waking to breakfast he had not cooked himself. He sat up quickly, momentarily disoriented, then remembered the events of the previous night. He scrambled to his feet and went to the kitchen area, where Winona stood at his stove, turning bacon in his one good skillet. I say I work, she said without turning around. So I work. You have very little food, I make what I can find. You should be resting, he protested, but she gave him a look that suggested she had no patience for that argument. I rest when there is time for rest. Now there is time for work. You have animals, some chickens, 2 cows, 3 horses. The rest I sold off or they died in the drought last summer. Chickens need feeding. Cows need milking. I will do this after we eat." Clayton opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. There was something in her bearing that told him she needed to feel useful, needed to feel like she was earning her keep rather than accepting charity. He understood that, had felt the same way himself when he was young and proud and stupid. "All right," he said finally. "But if you feel tired or sick, you stop." "Agreed, agreed," she said, and served him breakfast on his own plate while she ate hers from the skillet standing up. The bacon was perfectly cooked, and she had somehow made biscuits from his meager flour supply. Better biscuits than he had managed in 2 years of trying. After breakfast, she insisted on seeing the animals, so he gave her a tour of his modest operation. The chickens were scratching around in their coop, and she collected eggs with efficient movements while scattering feed. She milked the cows with practiced hands, and he found himself watching the sure way she moved, economical and purposeful despite her condition. She examined the horses critically, running her hands down their legs and checking their hooves. "This one has a stone bruise," she said, pointing to his best mare. "You know this." I knew she was favoring that foot, but I could not figure out why. "I show you." She picked up the hoof and showed him the slight swelling in the frog. "Needs poultice. You have Clay down by the creek." "I will make poultice. She will be better in 3 days." They worked together through the morning, and Clayton found himself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation. Winona moved through the ranch work with the confidence of someone who had grown up around animals and hard labor, and she seemed to anticipate what needed doing before he could ask. When the sun climbed high and hot, he insisted they stop for water and rest. They sat in the shade of the barn, passing a water jug back and forth, and Clayton studied her profile against the bright Oklahoma sky. In daylight, she looked even younger than he had first thought, but there was an old quality to her eyes, like she had seen too much too soon. "How old are you?" he asked, then immediately regretted the rudeness of the question. 20 years, she said. "My husband was 23 when he died. We were married 1 year. She touched her belly lightly. "This child, he is all I have of husband now. You think it is a boy. I know it is a boy. He kicks like horse." She smiled slightly, the first real smile he had seen from her, and it transformed her face. "My husband, his name was James Durant. He was good man, even though Apache people did not think so. He learned some Apache words, tried to understand our ways. He brought me to live near Fort where he worked. Said he would build house for us after baby came. Then one night he was scouting near the reservation and some soldiers who were drunk, they shoot him. They say they think he is hostile. They say sorry. They do not say sorry to right people." The bitterness in her voice was controlled but unmistakable. Clayton did not know what to say to that, could not imagine the words that would make any of it better. So he just sat with her in the silence, letting it stretch out until she spoke again. "Why do you live alone? You are young man, should have wife, family." Now it was his turn to stare out at the horizon. "I had a wife, Sarah. She died in childbirth 2 years ago. The baby died too, a little girl. After that, I just could not see the point of much. Kept the ranch going because I needed something to do with my hands, but most days I was just going through the motions." "I am sorry," Winona said softly. "That is hard grief to carry." "Seems like we are both carrying hard grief," Clayton said, and she nodded. They sat there a while longer, 2 people who had lost everything finding an unexpected moment of understanding in the shade of a barn in Oklahoma territory. Finally, Winona pushed herself to her feet with a grunt. "Grief does not stop work. I will make poultice for horse now." The days fell into a rhythm after that. Winona proved to be worth her weight in gold around the ranch, fixing things he had let slide, organizing his chaotic supplies, and cooking meals that actually had flavor beyond salt and grease. She sewed patches on his worn shirts, mended holes in his socks, and somehow managed to keep the house cleaner than it had been since Sarah died. In return, he made sure she ate well, rested when she needed to, and had everything she required for the baby's arrival. But it was not all smooth going. 3 days after Winona arrived, Clayton rode into Guthrie for supplies and encountered the ugly side of frontier justice. He was loading flour and coffee into his wagon when Sheriff Tom Brennan approached, his face set in hard lines. "Heard you got yourself some company out at your place, York," Brennan said without preamble. Clayton continued loading supplies, not looking at the sheriff. News travels fast. News about a white man harboring an Apache travels even faster. People are not happy about it. People can mind their own business. It becomes my business when there is talk of riding out to your place and taking care of the problem themselves. Brennan leaned against the wagon, his voice dropping lower. "Look, I know you are a decent man, and I am not saying you did anything wrong by giving her a meal and sending her on her way. But if she is still there, you need to send her packing before someone gets hurt." Clayton finally looked at the sheriff, his jaw tight. "She is pregnant and has nowhere else to go. I am not turning her out." "Then you are a fool. There are men in this town who lost family to Apache raids. They see an Apache woman, they do not care about the details. They just see red. She is not a threat to anyone. Her husband was a cavalry scout, for God's sake. And he is dead now, which tells you something about the value of that distinction." Brennan straightened up, his expression weary. "I am trying to help you, York. I do not want to see anyone get hurt over this, you included. But if you insist on keeping her around, I cannot guarantee your safety or hers." Clayton climbed up onto the wagon seat, gathering the reins. "Then I guess we will have to take our chances. Good day, Sheriff." He drove home with his stomach in knots, anger and fear warring in his chest. When he pulled up to the house, Winona was hanging laundry on the line he had strung between 2 posts. She took one look at his face and stopped what she was doing. "There is trouble," she said. It was not a question. Might be. He started unloading supplies and she came to help despite his protest. "Sheriff says some folks in town are not happy about you being here. Then I will go. I do not want to bring trouble to you. You have been kind." "You are not going anywhere," Clayton said sharply, then softened his tone. "I am sorry. I did not mean to bark at you, but you are not going anywhere. This is my land and I decide who stays on it. If people do not like it, they can go straight to hell." Winona studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. "You would risk trouble for me. Why?" It was a fair question, one he had been asking himself. Clayton set down the bag of flour he was carrying and met her gaze. "Because it is the right thing to do. Because I have let too many things slide these past 2 years, just going through the motions, not caring much about anything. But this matters. You matter. That baby matters. And if I stand by and let fear and hatred dictate what I do, then I might as well be dead inside." Something changed in her expression, a softening around her eyes. "You are good man, Clayton York." "I am just a man trying to do right," he said quietly. "Nothing more than that." But he started keeping the rifle closer after that conversation, and he made sure the doors were locked at night. He taught Winona how to load and fire his spare revolver, though she assured him she already knew how from her time at the fort. They did not talk much about the potential danger, but it hung over the ranch like a storm cloud, waiting to break. 2 weeks passed without incident, and Clayton started to hope that maybe the sheriff had been exaggerating the danger. Winona was moving slower now, the baby clearly getting closer to term, and he found himself worrying about the practical aspects of childbirth on an isolated ranch. He knew the basics from when Sarah went into labor, but that had ended in tragedy, and the memory of it kept him awake at night. "Do you know anything about delivering a baby?" he asked Winona one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the Oklahoma prairie. "I have helped with 3 births in my village. I know what to do." She said it calmly, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. What if something goes wrong? Then it goes wrong. Women have babies, babies are born, this is how it works. Worrying does not change anything. "I know, but after Sarah, I just—" He trailed off, unable to articulate the fear that gripped him. Winona reached over and put her hand on his arm, a gesture of comfort that surprised them both. "Your wife, what happened to her?" The baby was turned wrong. The midwife tried everything, but Sarah was in labor for 2 days. Finally, they both just gave out. "I stood there the whole time, unable to do a damn thing to help." His voice cracked on the last word. "That was not your fault." "I know that up here," he tapped his head. "But knowing and believing are different things." They sat in silence for a while, her hand still on his arm, and Clayton realized that for the first time since Sarah died, he did not feel entirely alone in the world. It was not that Winona was replacing his wife. Nothing could do that. But she was filling a different empty space he had not even known was there. She was his friend, he realized, maybe his only real friend in a long time. "I am afraid too," Winona admitted quietly. "My mother died giving birth to my brother. I was 10 years old. I remember the blood, the screaming. I remember being afraid it would be my fate too someday. But you still married, still chose to have a child. Because James wanted family so much, and I wanted to give him that. I did not think about fear then, only about love. Now James is gone, and fear comes back, but baby comes anyway. So I will be brave because there is no other choice." Clayton turned his hand over and squeezed her fingers gently. "You are the bravest person I have ever met." She laughed softly, a sound he had not heard from her before. "I do not feel brave. I feel tired and scared and very large." "Well, you look brave from where I am sitting." They stayed like that until the sun disappeared, and the stars came out, connected by a simple touch and a shared understanding of loss and fear and the determination to keep going anyway. When they finally went inside, Clayton realized that something had shifted between them. Some invisible line had been crossed that he could not quite name but definitely felt. The trouble came 3 days later, in the middle of the night. Clayton woke to the sound of horses and men's voices outside, and his stomach dropped. He grabbed his rifle and went to the window, peering out through the curtain to see 6 riders in the yard, torches blazing. He recognized a few of them, hotheads and drunks from Guthrie who would not have the courage to do this sober or alone. "York, send out the Indian," one of them shouted, and Clayton recognized the voice as belonging to Frank Miller, a rancher whose brother had been killed in a raid 10 years ago. "We know you got her in there. This is your last chance to hand her over peaceful-like." Clayton's hands tightened on the rifle. Behind him, he heard Winona emerge from the bedroom, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor. "I will go," she said quietly. "I do not want them to hurt you." "Like hell you will." Clayton moved to the door, keeping the rifle ready. "Stay back." He opened the door but did not step outside, keeping the solid wood as cover between him and the riders. "Winona Durant is under my protection. She has done nothing wrong and she is not going anywhere. Now get off my property before I start treating you like the trespassers you are. She is a squaw and does not belong here." Another voice called out, slurred with liquor. "We are cleaning up this territory, starting with her." "She is a widow whose husband died serving the United States Cavalry," Clayton shouted back. "What have any of you done for your country besides drink and make trouble? Her kind killed my brother." Frank Miller spurred his horse closer. "They tortured him, scalped him, left him to die slow. I do not care whose wife she was. She does not get to live peaceful while my brother is in the ground. I am sorry about your brother, Frank, but Winona had nothing to do with that. She was probably a child when it happened. Taking revenge on innocent people does not bring anybody back." "She ain't innocent. None of them are." The situation was deteriorating fast, and Clayton could see some of the riders pulling out weapons. He raised the rifle to his shoulder, his heart pounding. "First man who makes a move gets a bullet. I mean it. This is my land and you are not welcome here." For a long moment it could have gone either way. Clayton could see the men exchanging glances, weighing their options. Then a new voice cut through the night, sharp with authority. "All of you stand down. Now." Sheriff Brennan rode into the yard with 2 deputies, their guns drawn. "I said stand down. Frank, you and your boys put those weapons away before I lock every last one of you up for attempted assault." "She does not belong here," Frank protested, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. "That is for the law to decide, not a bunch of drunks with torches. Now ride on home before I decide to charge you with trespassing, disturbing the peace, and being goddamn stupid." Brennan's horse danced sideways as he maneuvered between the vigilantes and the house. York is within his rights to house whoever he wants on his own property. The woman has broken no laws. If any of you have a problem with that, you can take it up with a judge, but you will not take it into your own hands, not in my jurisdiction. The men grumbled and muttered, but slowly they began to turn their horses away. Frank Miller was the last to go, fixing Clayton with a venomous glare. "This is not over, York. You made your choice, now you live with it." They rode off into the darkness, their torch flames flickering like angry fireflies. Brennan waited until they were gone, then turned to Clayton. "Next time I give you advice about trouble, you might want to listen." "Noted," Clayton said, lowering the rifle but not putting it away. "Thank you for coming. Had a feeling something like this might happen. Been keeping an eye on that group." Brennan glanced at the house. "I cannot protect you out here forever, York. You need to think hard about whether this is really worth it." "It is worth it," Clayton said without hesitation. The sheriff shook his head. "You are either brave or foolish, and I have not decided which yet. Keep your guns close and your eyes open. I will try to keep them off your back, but I can only do so much." After the sheriff and his deputies left, Clayton stood in the yard for a long time, making sure no one was coming back. When he finally went inside, Winona was sitting at the table, her hands folded in her lap, her face composed but pale. "You should not have done that," she said. "They could have killed you. They could have tried." Clayton set the rifle down and sank into the chair across from her. His hands were shaking now that the danger had passed, adrenaline draining out of his system. "Are you all right?" "I am fine. Scared, but fine." She looked down at her hands. "Why do you keep doing this? Keep putting yourself in danger for me? I am nothing to you. You are not nothing." The words came out more forcefully than he intended. "You are my friend. More than that, you are a good person who deserves to live without fear, and I am done standing by while bad things happen to good people. I did that when Sarah died, just accepted it and did nothing, became nothing. I will not do it again." Winona looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything, just stay. Help me make this place into something again. Help me remember how to be human." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Please." She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I will stay, as long as you will have me." Something passed between them in that moment, something deeper and more significant than either of them was ready to name. But it was there, undeniable and growing. A connection forged in shared loss and mutual protection that was gradually transforming into something else entirely. The baby came 2 weeks later, on a cold October morning when frost painted the grass silver and Clayton's breath fogged the air as he did the morning chores. He was in the barn milking the cows when he heard Winona call his name, her voice tight with pain and urgency. He dropped the milk pail and ran to the house, finding her leaning against the kitchen table, water pooled at her feet. "The baby is coming," she said, remarkably calm for someone whose face was contorted with pain. "It will be soon, I think. The pains are close together." Clayton's mind went blank with panic for a second, memories of Sarah's labor overwhelming him. Then he pushed them aside forcefully. This was not Sarah. Winona was strong and healthy, and she knew what to do. He just had to help her. "Tell me what you need," he said, proud that his voice came out steady. "Clean linens, hot water, sharp knife for cord, something to wrap baby in, and you will need to help me to bed." He gathered the supplies quickly while she breathed through another contraction, then helped her to the bedroom. She squeezed his hand so hard during the walk that he thought she might break bones, but she did not cry out. Once she was lying down, he brought the water and linens, feeling utterly inadequate for what was about to happen. "Have you ever delivered a baby?" she asked, and he shook his head. "No. I was there when Sarah was in labor, but the midwife did everything." "Then I will tell you what to do. This baby comes fast, I can feel it." She gritted her teeth through another contraction. "You will need to be ready to catch baby when he comes. Do you understand?" "I understand." Clayton rolled up his sleeves, his heart hammering against his ribs. "You can do this, Winona. You are strong." "I know I am strong," she said with a flash of her usual spirit. "That is not the question." The labor progressed quickly, just as she predicted. Within an hour she was bearing down, her face sheened with sweat, her hands gripping the sheets. Clayton positioned himself as she instructed, talking to her constantly, telling her she was doing great. She was almost there, just a little more. He could see the baby's head crowning, and his hands shook as he prepared to receive the child. "One more push," he urged. "Come on, Winona, one more big push." She pushed with a strength that amazed him, and suddenly the baby slid into his waiting hands, slippery and warm and screaming its lungs out. A boy, just as she had predicted, squalling and red-faced and absolutely beautiful. "You have a son," Clayton said, his voice choked with emotion as he quickly cleaned the baby's face and tied off the cord before cutting it. "A healthy, loud son." He wrapped the baby in a clean cloth and placed him in Winona's arms. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her son, her fingers tracing his tiny features with wonder. "James," she whispered. "I will name you James for your father." She looked up at Clayton with such gratitude and joy that it made his chest ache. "Thank you. Thank you for helping me bring him into the world." "You did all the hard work," Clayton said, but he felt a fierce pride and protectiveness toward both of them that took him by surprise. He had helped bring this child into the world, had been part of this miracle, and it felt like something inside him that had been broken for 2 years was finally starting to heal. He helped Winona get cleaned up and comfortable, then took care of the afterbirth and soiled linens while she nursed the baby for the first time. When everything was settled, he sat in the chair by the bed, unable to stop looking at the two of them, mother and child, alive and healthy and safe. "You should rest," he said softly, "both of you." "Will you stay?" Winona asked, her eyes already drifting closed. "I do not want to be alone yet." "I will stay," he promised. "I will be right here." He sat there as she fell asleep with the baby nestled against her, and he felt something shift fundamentally in his heart. This was not his child, not his wife, but they felt like family in a way he could not explain. Somewhere along the way, Winona had become essential to him, not just as a friend but as something more. He was falling in love with her, he realized, had probably been falling for weeks without admitting it to himself. The realization should have scared him. It had only been 2 years since Sarah died, and he had loved his wife deeply. But what he felt for Winona was different, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared struggle rather than youthful passion. It was quieter but no less powerful, and it felt right in a way he could not deny. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and constant activity. Baby James was a healthy eater with powerful lungs, and Winona was up and down throughout the night nursing him. Clayton helped where he could, changing diapers and walking the floor with the baby when Winona needed to sleep. They moved through the house like partners in an intricate dance, anticipating each other's needs, working together to care for the infant. One night, about 3 weeks after James was born, Clayton was walking the floor with the baby while Winona caught a few hours of sleep. James had finally settled down, his little body warm and trusting against Clayton's chest, and he stood by the window looking out at the star-filled sky. Winona emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in a shawl, and came to stand beside him. "You are good with him," she said quietly. "Natural father." "I do not know about that. I am just doing what needs doing. It is more than that." She leaned against his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. "You did not have to help me. You did not have to let us stay. But you did, and you have been better to us than I had any right to expect." "Why?" Clayton looked down at her, at the curve of her cheek in the moonlight, at the trust in her eyes. "At first, it was just because it was the right thing to do, but somewhere along the way it became more than that." "You became more than that." "What do you mean?" He took a breath, knowing he was about to step off a cliff but unable to stop himself. "I mean, I care about you, Winona, more than just as a friend or someone I am helping. I think about you all the time. I look forward to our conversations, to working beside you, to seeing you with James. When those men came with torches, all I could think was that I would do anything to keep you safe. And I know it has not been long, and maybe it is too soon after Sarah, but I cannot help how I feel." Winona was very still, and for a long moment she did not say anything. Clayton felt his heart sinking, thinking he had misread everything, had ruined what they had by wanting more. Then she reached up and touched his face with her free hand, her palm warm against his cheek. "I care for you too," she whispered. "I have been afraid to say it, afraid it is wrong somehow. James is only weeks old and my husband has been dead only 3 months, but my heart does not care about proper timing. It only knows that when I am with you, I feel safe and seen and valued. You look at me like I matter, not like I am just an Indian woman or a burden or a problem to solve. You look at me like I am just Winona, and that is a precious thing." Clayton shifted the baby to one arm and used his other hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "You are precious to me, you and James both. I do not know if I can be what you need," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I am still grieving James's father. I am still learning how to be a mother. I am still Apache in a world that hates Apache people. I come with so much trouble, Clayton. I do not care about any of that. I just care about you." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and brushed his lips against hers in the softest kiss he could manage. She made a small sound and kissed him back, and it felt like coming home. They stood there in the moonlight, kissing gently around the sleeping baby between them, and Clayton felt the last of the ice around his heart finally melt away. This was what healing felt like, he realized. Not forgetting the past or pretending it did not hurt, but opening yourself up to new love, new possibilities, new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, Winona was smiling, really smiling, and it transformed her face. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "Now we keep doing what we have been doing. We take care of each other, take care of James, make this ranch into a real home. And when enough time has passed that it feels right, maybe we talk about making this official. Getting married, being a real family." He paused. "If that is something you would want." "I would want that," she said softly. "I would want that very much. But Clayton, we need to be realistic. The town already hates that I am here. If you marry me, it will be even worse. You could lose everything." "I already lost everything once." "I am not afraid of it happening again." He kissed her forehead gently. "We will figure it out together. That is what we do." They went back to bed eventually, but something fundamental had changed between them. They were not just housemates or friends anymore. They were partners, on their way to becoming something more permanent. The thought should have terrified Clayton, but instead it filled him with quiet hope. The winter came on hard that year, with early snows and bitter winds that howled across the prairie. Clayton worked harder than he had in years, determined to keep the ranch running and provide for Winona and James. Winona continued to manage the household with impressive efficiency, despite the demands of caring for an infant. Little James thrived, growing plump and healthy, his cries filling the house with a kind of chaotic life that Clayton had not known he was missing. They did not go to Guthrie much during those months, preferring to stay close to home and avoid the hostile stares and whispered comments. Sheriff Brennan rode out once in December to check on them, bringing news that Frank Miller and his group had been warned to stay away or face jail time. The sheriff looked at Clayton and Winona with something like respect in his eyes. "You two are either crazy or determined. I have not decided which," he said as he accepted a cup of coffee at their table. "But I will say this, you are making it work better than most folks thought you would." "We are doing our best," Clayton said, and Winona nodded in agreement. "Well, your best is apparently good enough. Just keep your heads down and your guns close, and maybe you will be all right." Brennan left after finishing his coffee, and Clayton watched him ride away with mixed feelings. It was good to have the law on their side, but the fact that they needed protection at all was a stark reminder of the world they lived in. Christmas came and went quietly. Clayton fashioned a simple wooden rattle for James and gave Winona a warm shawl he had bought on his last trip to town. She gave him a shirt she had sewn from fabric she had somehow managed to obtain, embroidered with simple but beautiful patterns along the collar and cuffs that showed her Apache heritage. He wore it constantly, proud to carry that symbol of her culture and her love. As winter gave way to spring, something in the atmosphere around the ranch began to shift. Winona's mourning for her first husband was slowly transforming into bittersweet memory rather than fresh grief. She talked about James Durant more easily now, sharing stories of their brief time together without the haunted look in her eyes. Clayton understood that she would always carry him in her heart, just as he would always carry Sarah, but there was room for new love alongside the old. One warm April evening, as they sat on the porch watching baby James play with his rattle on a blanket, Clayton reached over and took Winona's hand. She laced her fingers through his without hesitation, and they sat there in comfortable silence for a while. "I have been thinking," Clayton said eventually, "about what we talked about last fall, about making this official." Winona turned to look at him, her expression serious but not unhappy. "And what have you been thinking?" "That I want to marry you. Not because it is convenient or because you need protection, but because I love you. I love the way you hum when you cook. I love how fierce you are when you are defending something you believe in. I love watching you with James. I love our conversations and our silences and the way you make this old house feel like a home again." He squeezed her hand. "I know we come from different worlds and that marrying me will not solve all your problems. It might even create new ones. But I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me. Winona was crying now, but she was smiling too. I love you too, Clayton York. I think I have loved you since you pointed that rifle at me and then immediately felt bad about it. You have the kindest heart of any man I have ever known. Yes, I will marry you. Yes to all of it. Clayton pulled her close and kissed her properly, not the gentle, hesitant kisses of their early relationship, but with all the passion and commitment he felt. When they broke apart, baby James was watching them with wide, curious eyes, and they both laughed. I think he approves, Winona said. Good, because he is going to be stuck with me as a father. He could do much worse. She rested her head on his shoulder. When should we do this? Getting married, I mean. Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year, I am not going anywhere. Soon, she said decidedly. I do not want to wait. Life is too short, and we both know how quickly everything can change. Let us be married and be a family officially. They went to Guthrie the following week. Clayton wearing his embroidered shirt and Winona in her best dress with James bundled in her arms. They found a circuit preacher who was willing to perform the ceremony without asking too many questions about Winona's heritage, though the man's eyes widened slightly when he realized she was Apache. Sheriff Brennan and his wife stood as witnesses, which was more support than Clayton had expected. The ceremony was simple and quick, just the basic vows and the exchange of simple gold bands that Clayton had bought from the general store. But when the preacher pronounced them man and wife and Clayton kissed his new bride, it felt more real and meaningful than anything he had done in years. Congratulations, Sheriff Brennan said afterward, shaking Clayton's hand. You are officially the most controversial couple in Guthrie. I think we can live with that, Clayton said, and Winona laughed. They spent their wedding night in the same house they had been sharing for months, but everything felt different now. It was not just that they could finally express their love physically, though that was part of it. It was the sense of permanence, of commitment, of being a true family rather than just two people helping each other survive. When Clayton held Winona that night, he felt complete in a way he had not since Sarah died. The following months were not easy. True to Sheriff Brennan's prediction, news of their marriage spread through the territory like wildfire, and reactions ranged from disapproval to outright hostility. They lost some of the few customers Clayton had for his cattle and horses. Some merchants in Guthrie refused to serve them. Once, someone threw rocks at their windows in the middle of the night, though Brennan made sure it did not happen again. But there were also unexpected allies. A few other ranchers, outsiders themselves who remembered what it was like to be unwelcome, started doing business with them. A Quaker family who had settled near Guthrie invited them to dinner and treated Winona with genuine kindness. Even some of the Apache people from the reservation, hearing about the marriage, began to cautiously reach out, curious about this white man who had married one of their own and refused to be ashamed of it. Through it all, Clayton and Winona built their life together. They worked side by side to improve the ranch, adding more livestock as they could afford it, repairing buildings, clearing new fields. Winona taught Clayton some of the Apache language and told him stories about her people's history and traditions. He listened and learned, respecting her heritage and wanting to understand where she came from. Baby James grew like a weed, learning to sit up and then crawl, babbling constantly in a mixture of English and Apache words. Clayton was amazed by how completely he loved this child who was not his by blood, but was absolutely his son in every way that mattered. When James took his first steps one sunny July afternoon, stumbling from Winona's arms into Clayton's, both parents cheered like he had won a race. That fall, Winona told Clayton she was pregnant again. He was thrilled but also terrified, memories of Sarah's death still haunting him despite the successful birth of James. Winona saw the fear in his eyes and took his hands in hers. "I will be fine," she said firmly. "I am strong, and this baby will be strong. Do not let the past steal our joy in the present." She was right, though Clayton could not completely shake his worry. He was overprotective throughout the pregnancy, constantly fussing over her and trying to keep her from working too hard. She tolerated it with good humor, teasing him about being like a nervous hen, but he could tell she appreciated the care. Their daughter was born the following May, on a warm spring morning when the prairie was covered in wildflowers. The birth was easier than James's had been, and the baby girl came into the world squalling just as loudly as her brother had. They named her Sarah, for Clayton's first wife, and Winona chose the middle name of Kaya, which meant elder sister in Apache. Clayton held his daughter for the first time with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the miracle of it. This was a second chance, a blessing he had not thought he would receive. Looking at Winona exhausted but smiling in the bed, at baby Sarah in his arms, at 2-year-old James trying to climb up to see his sister, he felt a gratitude so profound it was almost painful. "We have a good life," he said to Winona that night after the children were finally asleep. "Against all odds, we have built something real and good here." "We have," she agreed, nestling against him, "and we are not done yet. There is still so much ahead of us." She was right. The years rolled by, bringing challenges and joys in equal measure. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. They added 2 more children to their family. Another son they named Thomas, and a daughter they named Grace. James grew into a bright, curious boy who could speak both English and Apache fluently, and who showed his mother's strength and his adopted father's kindness. Sarah was fierce and determined. Thomas was quiet and thoughtful, and Grace was wild and joyful. Clayton and Winona's marriage deepened and matured over the years. They had their arguments, their disagreements about how to raise the children or run the ranch, but they always worked through them with respect and love. They learned each other's moods and needs, developed their own private jokes and traditions, and built a partnership that was stronger than either of them had thought possible that first night when she knocked on his door seeking work. The territory changed around them too. Oklahoma became a state in 1907, bringing new laws and new opportunities. The old hostilities toward Native Americans did not disappear, but they became less overt as mixed families like theirs became more common. Guthrie grew and changed, and while Clayton and Winona never became fully accepted by everyone, they earned respect through hard work and dignity. Sheriff Brennan remained a friend over the years, watching their family grow with something like wonder. "You two proved a lot of people wrong," he said one day when he stopped by for his occasional visit. "Including me, if I am being honest. I did not think this could work, but you made it work through sheer stubbornness." "Love and stubbornness," Clayton corrected with a grin. "Do not forget the love." As the years passed into decades, Clayton and Winona grew old together on their ranch in Oklahoma. They watched their children grow up, get married, and have children of their own. They became grandparents 8 times over. Their house always full of noise and laughter during family gatherings. The old prejudices never completely disappeared, but their children and grandchildren moved through the world with more freedom than Winona had ever had, able to claim both their Apache heritage and their American citizenship, without having to choose between them. On warm evenings, Clayton and Winona would sit on their porch as they had done for over 40 years, watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. Clayton's hair had gone completely white, and his hands were gnarled from decades of ranch work. Winona moved slower now, her once black hair streaked with silver, but her eyes were still as direct and fearless as they had been the day she first knocked on his door. "You ever regret it?" Clayton asked one evening. "All the hardship we faced because you married me." Winona looked at him with such love and certainty that it took his breath away even after all these years. "Never. Not for one single moment. You gave me everything when I had nothing. You gave me safety, respect, love, family, a home. You gave me a life worth living. How could I ever regret that?" "I could say the same thing about you," Clayton said, taking her weathered hand in his. "You brought me back to life when I was just going through the motions. You gave me purpose and love and a family I cherish more than anything. You saved me just as much as I saved you." "Then we saved each other," Winona said with a smile. "And that is the best kind of love story." They sat there as the stars came out, two people who had found each other in the harshest of circumstances and built something beautiful together. Behind them in the house, they could hear their grandson James, named for Winona's first husband, playing with his siblings and the sound of their children talking and laughing. It was the sound of family, of continuity, of love that transcended all the barriers that had tried to keep them apart. Clayton York died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by his family in the house he had shared with Winona for over 50 years. Winona held his hand as he slipped away, and though she grieved deeply, she found comfort in the knowledge that they had been blessed with a long and happy life together. She lived another 5 years after his passing, spending her final years surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of courage and love that their grandparents had built. When Winona finally joined Clayton, they were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their ranch, their headstones simple, but bearing both their names in English and Winona's Apache name as well. Their descendants continued to work the land for generations, always remembering the story of how their family began, with a desperate woman knocking on a door and a lonely cowboy who offered her everything he had to give, and in return received more than he ever could have imagined. The ranch still stands today, passed down through the York family, a testament to the power of love to overcome prejudice, loss, and hardship. The story of Clayton and Winona is told to each new generation, a reminder that sometimes the most unlikely meetings can lead to the most profound connections, and that kindness offered in desperate times can change not just individual lives, but the course of entire families for generations to come. Their love story became legend in the area, the tale of the cowboy and the Apache woman who defied everyone's expectations and built a life together that was stronger than the sum of its parts. People still speak of them with respect and admiration. The lonely cowboy who saw past prejudice to the person beneath, and the brave woman who had the courage to knock on a stranger's door and ask for help. Together, they proved that love knows no boundaries of race or culture, that family is built not just on blood but on commitment and sacrifice, and that the most extraordinary lives can grow from the most ordinary moment of compassion. In the end, that single knock on a weathered door in Oklahoma Territory changed everything. It brought two lost souls together and created a family that flourished across generations. It proved that offering everything you have to give to someone in need is never wasted, and that accepting help with dignity, and then working to deserve, it creates bonds stronger than steel. Clayton and Winona's story is a reminder that the Wild West was not just a place of violence and hardship, but also a place where unlikely love stories could bloom against all odds, where courage and kindness could overcome hatred, and where two people from completely different worlds could create something beautiful together that would last long after they were gone.